I'm standing here in downtown Kankakee looking at the landscaping. They do the past, 5-6 years, they've done a good job at sprucing it up, doing some landscaping and container flowers. And then come and look at this corner. Now, this was extended out. It used to not be that shape. I don't know how many years back they extended it like this. But they used that opportunity to plant a tree. Now, this tree is a ginkgo tree. It doesn't have any ecological benefit for the urban landscaping. It's not technically not native. It's what I consider a dinosaur tree. It was native here many millions of years ago when dinosaurs were around here. This is in the same category as dawn redwood. Dawn redwood is also a dinosaur tree. It used to be way more widespread. But anyhow, it's a decent tree to plant. It's not invasive, doesn't cause a problem or anything, even though it doesn't have a whole lot of benefit. But that's kind of like, well, it's a better choice than this here. This is a Norway maple. Norway maple is invasive and non-native, but it can handle a lot of pollution. So I say that the only time you should plant a Norway maple is in dirty, messy, awful pollution cities when you run out of other trees to plant. Because you can't just plant only, hackberry and ginkgo everywhere. But anyhow, I should say hackberry and Kentucky coffee tree. That's another good one that can handle pollution. But anyhow, so I would say it's fine to plant this ginkgo here because it can handle pollution and is not invasive. But two things with this. One, they did a crappy job planting it. See how it's leaning? When you plant a ball and burlap, it's important to make sure that the soil is stable and not loose, or you at least, stake it up or something with wire so it doesn't end up bending. They might have just planted it lopsided because they didn't care or didn't know what they were doing, but more likely they planted it nice and straight, but the ground settled on one side, so it ended up leaning. And then if you look up this ginkgo, they also did the mulch wrong. This is called dome mulching. This is not what you're supposed to do. You don't want the mulch up against the base of the tree because that's going to rot the bark. So that's wrong doing that. They did put a really good thick layer on. That's nice. But also, if you look up in here, whoever's trimming it doesn't know how to trim right. This here, when they trimmed it, how is it going to heal? You have the stub that the tree, because it's an open wound, has to grow up around it. So that's going to be hard to heal. They didn't do a good job trimming that. And even though ginkgos usually have a good branch system, sometimes because a lot of them are cultivars, because people want the males rather than females, so it'll be grafted. But still, some of the ones that I've seen selected, maybe they haven't spent the most time in getting the best branch structure. So I've noticed a lot of them need a little bit of care. Not so much like a staghorn sumac to make it well shaped, but not as nice as, say, a Kentucky coffee tree or bur oak. But if you look at here, they got cross branches. You don't want that. You don't want any narrow crotches. I don't see too many narrow crotches. But, here, this one here, they could have, here's another stub. They could have done a better job at that. But still, it's overall, I'm not going to say it's a bad choice. But anyhow, the way they planted it is one thing that's wrong with it. And the other thing that's wrong with it is Look at what street this is. This is Oak Street. See that? Oak Street should have oak trees planted on it. And one of the things that you need to pay attention to when you plant oak trees is whether people are going to be walking underneath it. And because they put this is actually a native called switchgrass. That's a good choice. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But one of the things when you plant a oak tree, a hickory tree, a walnut, such like that, you need to think about where are the nuts going to go. And with that, here is a drainage. Bingo. So there would be no problem in planting an oak tree there. And especially because it's Oak Street, oak tree, that's what they should have planted here rather than a ginkgo. They should have put probably a chinkapin oak or a Hills oak. That's what would have been better there. And now getting to the perennials they planted here. In the front, of course, I say they're overrated partially because I'm prejudiced, because I'm not in favor of non-natives, but also because I've worked in the labor maintaining world for a long time, and I don't want roses. They gotta fertilize them, water them, do 2 or 3 trimmings a year to make them look nice. There's a lot of other better choices, but a lot of people like roses. And these here, as you can see, they're not trimmed right. Whoever is doing it doesn't know about renewal pruning and waiting to a certain time in the spring in order to trim them back right. They don't know that. But then if you look at the grass they chose, this is switchgrass. It's a good choice. It's native. It stays upright. I wonder if maybe they planted one here and somebody stepped on it. The only problem with switchgrass is it is clump forming, but at the edges gradually creeps. So it's going to get wider and wider every year. So with that, you typically you would cut some of it out, or I've on one occasion cut the bottom off of a plastic pot and buried it in there. That way the switchgrass could grow down but couldn't creep outward. But anyhow, if you look at this too, this is what it looks like when it's in flower, switchgrass. But if you notice, 2 of these switchgrasses, 2 of them are sea green, and the others are a blue green. Now, because this was probably not a native landscaping company that planted, it was a mainstream, and mainstream people usually try to grow cultivars because they think it's something special, or there's a certain trait that they're grown for. These are probably 2 different varieties of switchgrass, and whoever did it, maybe they didn't pay attention to that, or maybe these were planted later than those, or vice versa. But it doesn't look nice and uniform. Now, why would uniform matter? Well, in a formal landscaping, sometimes it does. There was a time that I planted cleft phlox at a McDonald's, and some of them bloomed light blue, some of them blew white, and one bloomed pink. And because it was all, and there was no order to it, it wasn't back and forth or 3 here, 3 there or stuff, it looked kind of like a mistake. In fact, from the distance, to me, it looked like a drift of cleft phlox with some white garbage in there, because the white stood out so much more from the light blue. Anyhow, so some of that kind of plays a point, but I don't think it matters if you have them all different but similar. Meaning you took from a local ecotype and got the seeds from there. But these are specific cultivars because you can see the blue-green are all the same height, and they're not flowering yet. And these are flowering. That means they're probably from a different ecotype, meaning ecotype is 50 miles north and south, 100 miles east and west. So these are accustomed to a different amount of heat days before they trigger to flower than these. Kind of like if you had two bur oak trees, one from around here and one from Texas. The one from Texas would bloom with, flower on its trees way later, and might not have enough time to fill in its nuts because it's used to more amount of heat days to trigger the plant's time to, this is the time you flower, this is how much time you need for the nut, all that kind of thing. So it's a good choice of plant, switchgrass. It's a medium height perennial, medium large. I probably wouldn't have planted the switchgrass up there. I probably would have made sure this was packed in so it'd be like a fence or a hedge, and I probably would have put Side-Oats grama, or shorter grass that looks good year round too there. Or I would have just put switchgrass here, and I would have put another choice of perennials. Now you can't put one of the native roses in place of this. Even the short ones, sunshine rose, pasture rose, Virginia rose, because those native roses spread by rhizomes. So it would spread and fill in the whole place eventually. And in formal landscaping, you can't have that. But then over here, there's two, maybe there was three. I don't know if this is catnip or cat sage or something like that. It's some non-native thing. Of course, gray-green leaves, violet flowers. What is the best alternative for that? My favorite shrub, lead plant. That's what I would have planted here. I would have planted lead plant because it has almost similar features. And well, instead of short and wide, it's a little bit formal, but more rectangular than wide. Rectangular upright. But that's what I would have put here instead. And it also would have, because it's in the pea family, would have affixed nitrogen for this ginkgo. And then here you have one sedum. I don't know why they put one sedum. Sedum, this is autumn joy, or one of the similar varieties of sedum. Now, sedum is not invasive. It is very beneficial to pollinators in late season. So sedum is one of the plants that I don't usually grow in my nursery. I don't pull it out of an existing nursery, existing landscaping, but I don't push it because it's not native. Bottle gentian would be a good replacement for this, or a variety of aster that you make sure in that late June period of time, which I'll have another video about trimming goldenrods and asters in early summer to make it a nice well-rounded dome, because this, it is a formal looking plant. So that's what I would have done there. I would have had an oak tree because, the street's name is Oak. And I would have planted something shorter in the front. At least not here. This is too tall to be this close to the curb. But that's what I was thinking in this landscaping. It's certainly not bad comparison-wise with all the other landscapings in majority of cities. But then over here, like I said, this is the Norway maple. Non-native, dense root system at the base. This is just shitty. They put some effort in maybe weed care in the spring, but there's no sprinkler system and it's under a maple tree. You're not going to be able to get good grass to grow. It does look like they're trimming the edges or whatever over there. That looks nice. But this being Oak Street, definitely I would have put an oak tree there, and probably down here there's another drainage tile. So a chickapin oak, Hills oak, or there's something, or a maple leaf oak, which is actually sometimes considered a subspecies of Shumarty oak. And I suggest that because it's a smaller variety than Shumard oak, and it's used to growing in the mountains of the Ozarks. And there's also another one, I haven't planted it, but I've read about it, and that's called Quercus turbello. It's live southwest oak or something like that. I forget the common name, but that also would have been a good choice around here because you got limited root space. It's dry and not a lot of fertility. And then you need to look at what trees or plants in general grow in glades. That's thin soil, frequently infertile, that not necessarily drains fast, but dries out very, very easily. Because some glades are thin, heavy clay soil on limestone, so it doesn't necessarily drain fast with the heavy clay, but it does eventually get pretty dry. Of course, here you got I don't know, this is a myrrh maple, something like that. It's a shitty tree. Over here is I'm not sure. It looks like a Norway maple because of its seed. See how it connects, and it's flat in between, and it's still on there. Most of the native ones drop the seeds in the spring. But still, a crappy tree to plant here. There's so many more varieties, but who picked out what was their purpose, all that kind of stuff that really plays a big part in what the choices are. That's just a mess. Yeah, this definitely should have been replaced a while, and now it's actually a fire hazard. Hope it was trying to come back. But this would be a good place to plant something that can handle a lot of deflected heat. Maybe a shagbark hickory could go here. Oh, but no, we got to look to see if there's a drainage thing. Nope. And you also need to look at the size of the drainage, ditch drainage, because one time I planted a black walnut at a McDonald's, and then I realized a year later that the size of the black walnut nuts were too big to fit down the slots. So I had to go back, pull out the black walnut, and replace it with a bitternut hickory because the nuts were smaller. But anyhow, those are my thoughts. This area downtown Kankakee by the movie theater. Thanks for listening.